Hello, welcome to The French Chef. Our bestie, Miss Julia Child, is unavailable today, so I will be cooking instead. And because my little studio apartment has a tiny, tiny kitchen in New York, I thought that I would cook while I'm here in Atlanta visiting my family. Let's get started. And today we are doing her crepe recipe, which I have printed out. Now Julia does say that the crepes can be made savory or sweet, and we in my family have a big sweet tooth, so we are making dessert crepes today. And actually Julia tells us to make it in the blender, one of the rare shortcuts that she actually tells us to take explicitly. So first it says a cup of cold water and a cup of cold milk. So we shall add a cup of each. So there's a cup. Now I chose this recipe because, to be honest, I don't love cooking, but I do like baking, and I feel like this is kind of a hybrid between the two. I've never been great at cracking eggs, so we're gonna crack them into a little bowl first and then transfer them to avoid any shells. I think that's an effective strategy. Cameraman, we getting this?
Yep.
Amazing. And I was actually pretty shocked to read that we're meant to use the blender for this recipe because Julia usually does not condone shortcuts if they make the dish worse. But here she said it's completely fine and it's just a more efficient way to do things. So we're adding the 4 eggs in there. Whoa, big splash.
Shouldn't have been so violent, but anyway.
That is me right now. So next we have to add a little bit of salt. Julia does not specify what type of salt it would be. I'm thinking that kosher salt might not be good because then you could maybe feel the granules in the crepes. So we are using sea salt, which to me just feels a bit more French. Ordinarily, I would not measure salt like this. I would just kind of eyeball it. But in the spirit of precision, I will measure for Julia. Good enough. So the next step is to sift 2 cups of flour, and Julia is actually quite specific. There's a whole section at the start of the book about how to measure and sift flour. And it's quite a messy process. You're not meant to pat it down. You're meant to just loosely sift it into the container and then scrape off the top with a knife. So you see already that's creating a flour with no lumps in it, which is really good because then you don't get any lumps in the crepe batter. And normally actually the recipe that I use when I tend to make crepes is the Jacques Pepin recipe. So maybe at the end of this we can kind of compare results. Jack versus Julia. So the final ingredient that we have to add is melted butter. Julia does not specify salted versus unsalted, but she does make reference to the fact that often in desserts, unsalted is the preference, so that's what we're going to be using. She says to melt this before adding it to the mixture. I'm just going to melt it in the microwave because she doesn't specify that it has to be in a pan, so I think it's the same thing. We don't want exploding butter in the kitchen. This is very counterintuitive. Throwing everything in a blender doesn't seem very French or very precise to me, but it's just a big batter. So a little bit of the flour stuck to the sides, but that's normal. Julia says that if that happens, you just take a little rubber spatula, scrape it down, and then blend for a couple more seconds. We do have all these bubbles, which is from just incorporating air, knocking out all the lumps. I will say something that is not in this recipe is sugar, and I believe that's so that you can use the same batter for both sweet and savory crepes. But it is different from the Jacques Pepin recipe, so that's something to note. She says that crepe batter should be made at least 2 hours before it is to be used. This allows the flour particles to expand in the liquid and ensures a tender, light, thin crepe. It has thickened up a bit. Julia says that it should just be thick enough to just coat a wooden spoon, but that we can add more water if need be, which, just from looking at it, I feel like it might be too thick. It says to start on relatively high heat, and Julia does advise to either use some bacon rind for the fat or to use a bit of neutral oil. The only oil that we have at home is olive oil, and I don't want that to impart any flavor on the crepe. So I am just gonna use a little bit of butter, but that technically is not what is suggested by Miss Julia. We can even do it the way Julia films it, come over my shoulder and film from my perspective. Beautiful, beautiful. Okay. This is something anecdotally that I've done for a long time, but it is something that Julia specifically brings up, that the first crepe is the throwaway crepe. It's just to test the amount of batter you need, the thickness, and the temperature of the pan. So just like Julia advises, this first crepe is probably gonna suck, but that's normal. So just as we expected, a bad throwaway pancake. That's okay. We shall keep trying. We'll discard our bad pancake. And if the filming of this is a bit chaotic, it feels chaotic, just so you know. I don't know if this is gonna work, but we're going to attempt to flip it. What gives me confidence is that one of her videos, Julia tried to flip and it didn't work, and she continued anyways. So if she can fail, I can fail confidently. Are we ready?
Yeah.
It half worked. The first pancake is the throwaway pancake. It's too thick, it's not good. But we are gonna do a little taste test. This is my brother Zach. We're doing a taste test for flavor. So it's floppy, it's too thick. This is not what we want, but cheers. I think that because there's not enough sugar in the batter, well, there's no sugar in the batter, it tastes very eggy to me.
I don't know, I just think it's like a little undercooked because it's thick.
But the flavor, what do you think about the flavor?
Tastes like a crepe.
My assumption is again that this is meant to be a batter for both savory and sweet crepes. And then it's more to do with the filling. Test.
You broke it.
Delicious.
Be honest.
No, it really is good.
Thank Julia Child.
Thank you, Julia Child.
We're creating a crepe with white cherry preserves. And we're going to flip it over. Then we're gonna flick it over one more time.
So we're doing a roll technique
One more time.
here.
We're doing a roll technique, yes.
Let's see.
Magnifique.
So my technique, we've sprinkled some powdered sugar, and then I take a little lemon juice, and it kind of combines with the powdered sugar. It makes a nice little glaze. Let's see. 11 out of 10. The final review.
Indeed.
What did we put in here?
It's a crepe with honey. I've rolled it up.
Solid?
It's good. It's good. It's good.
We'll tell Julia. Oh, we did say that my usual crepe recipe is the Jacques Pepin recipe. So, this morning we were craving crepes for breakfast, so I made his recipe. So, let's see. So here's the stack of the Jacques Pepin crepes. This recipe uses a little bit of sugar and does not require resting or a blender. So we shall see the difference. So, upon completing the recipe, everyone really enjoyed it. This morning we made the Jacques Pepin recipe, which some people slightly preferred because there is a bit of sugar in the recipe, but that might have been due to like the difference in the filling that we used. Overall it was really good. Slight chaos in the first pancake, but overall good. And what was really nice is that you don't really have to grocery shop because there are ingredients that basically everyone has at home. Flour, milk, eggs, and like a little bit of salt and butter. So overall, I would rate this recipe pretty highly, and I enjoyed it.